Hello everyone, I Yashasika Yadav. Welcome all to CIFFI, Cineast International Film Festival of India 2020. The event is being organized by Delhi Metropolitan Education, DME Media School, one of the top media schools in the country, in collaboration with prestigious Deakin University, Melbourne. While DME Media School focuses on the growth of the faculty and the students through academic and co-curricular activities, Deakin University imparts award-winning courses with innovative teaching pedagogies. The prolific association between DME and Deakin University created the coveted Film Festival in 2019, an event which witnessed participation of renowned filmmakers from all across India and abroad. The creative collaboration amongst the two institutes did not end with CIFFI, but it culminated in organizing the second and third editions of the flagship International Media Conference, ICANN, titled Indian Cinema and Alternate Networks and Issues of Community, Agenda, and News in its two respective iterations. I welcome you to CIFFI 2020, world's first 7-day hybrid international film festival by Educational Institute is taking place from 15th December to 21st December. Deliberations, discussions, panel discussions, masterclass, and of course, films. I would like to inform you all that we have movie screening ongoing parallelly on our website, ciffi.dme.ac.in. The movie streamings on the platform today include Alone, Bird Song, A Day in the Times of Lockdown, Life in the Lockdown, Baruha, Living with Corona, Humanity Must Live On Forever, Isolation, My Friend, How, Haridwar, The Heart of Ganga, Road Safety, Stalkan, Artham Anartham, Walking with the Planets, Franklin, Home of Soul, Meow or Never, The Catapult, The Forgotten Tigers, The Python Code, and Koti Banal. For more updates, please follow us on social media with handle names CIFFI Awards at Instagram, CIFFI Awards at Twitter, Cineast International Film Festival of India at YouTube, and CIFFI at Facebook. It gives me immense pleasure to announce that we have received 110 films in 10 languages across the world and Indian states, reflecting the diverse nature of the International Film Festival. We would also like to thank Mr. Tigmanshu Dulia, the famous editor, producer, and director, our festival ambassador for CIFFI 2020, for his guidance. We are also thankful to our partners, Vigyan Prasar, CMS Vatavaran, Kid Cinema, We Care Film Festival, Delhi International Film Festival, our university partner, Adamas University, institutional partners, Indian Documentary Producers Association, Indian Academy of Shorts, New Delhi Film Foundation, our media partners, The Pioneer and The Policy Times, for extending their support in organizing this one-of-a-kind mega hybrid film festival. The festival is a culmination of 33 sessions wherein all facets of movie making will be unraveled. We have an exciting lineup of 70 experts who will enrich your knowledge with their experience and deliberations, which will provide with pertinent insights to our audience. We have something for everyone. I would now like to welcome you to the segment 2 of the Bombay Talkies and the Australia-India connection. When we talk about Indian cinema, we cannot miss the contribution of Bombay Talkies and its founder Himanshu Rai and Devika Rani, which helped create a unique Indian cinematic language. Bombay Talkies has created some of the most technically impressive films of the time in India. The studio produced some of the most iconic films tackling social issues like untouchability. The film studio launched the careers of the movers and shakers of the acting world in Indian cinema, like Devika Rani, Ashok Kumar, Dilip Kumar, and Raj Kapoor. To discuss their contribution in Indian cinema, we have amongst us Dr. Vikrant Kishore, Professor Paul Dietz, and Mr. Peter Dietz. Before we start the session, I would like to introduce the speaker for today. This curated session of CIFFI 2020 is being moderated by Dr. Vikrant Kishore. He is also the festival director of CIFFI 2020. Dr. Vikrant Kishore, an academic, filmmaker, photographer, author, and a journalist, he has more than 25 documentaries and corporate films to his credit. Currently working at Deakin University, Australia as course director of film, television, and animation. Dr. Kishore focus is to bring due attention required to study of Indian cinema in Australia. He has organized various international conferences, film festivals, and seminars on Indian cinema. Dr. Kishore is the author of the book From Real to Real, Folk Dances of India in Bollywood Cinema. published by UNESCO, and he has co-edited 3 books, Bollywood and Its Others, Salam Bollywood and Indian Cinema, Filmic Content, Social Interface and New Technologies. We have with us Mr. Peter Dietz, who is director with Turner and Dietz Creative in Melbourne. He, in his 30s, discovered that he had an Indian connection, that too with the famed Indian filmmaker Himanshu Rai. Thus, he and his family embarked on a journey to explore their Indian heritage and to bring the world the pioneering work of Himanshu Rai did as filmmaker in India, especially with the foundation of Bombay Talkies, one of the 3 big film studios of India in 1930s. Mr. Dietz has curated the Bombay Talkies exhibition that was held in Melbourne from 8th Feb to 2nd July 2017 in Australia Centre for the Moving Images. We are also joined by Professor Paul Dietz. Professor Dietz grew up in Melbourne. He completed a PhD in forensic experimental psychology at Monash University in 1995. After spending a year in India in 1995, he worked as an alcohol and other drug researcher focused on reducing harms related to opioid overdose and risky alcohol consumption. He is a National Health and Medical Research Council Senior Research Fellow and has published over 290 scientific journal articles that have changed practice in Australia and overseas. We welcome you all. Thank you so much for joining us today. I thoroughly enjoyed the last session wherein we discussed about the visual grammars in movies like Shiraz and Throw of Dice. Today, we will be deconstructing the scenes from Achut Khanya, Kismat, and Mahal. Before we initiate the insightful discussion, I would request Dr. Amrish Saxena, Dean DME Media School and Festival Director, CIFFI 2020, to please address the gathering.
Thank you, Yashasrika. Welcome everybody this chilly morning in Delhi, and I think the weather might be pleasant in Melbourne this afternoon. And summers also, we in India we are having the winters, but then today is the 6th day of the CIFFI 2020. So we have been going very well. The momentum has been there for the last 5 days. But obviously, as Vikrant said, there's a morning, so people are gradually joining slowly, but then it will pick up, I believe, and this will prove to be a fruitful session, as Yashasika rightly said. The first session, which happened on the very first day of the film festival, on the 15th, in a way sensitized a number of people who were not that familiar, particularly talking about the younger generation. They were not that familiar with Himanshu Rai and his contribution. So that created the grounding, that created the base to understand as to how long Indian cinema has traveled and how rich Indian cinema has been there right from the beginning. Even 100 years ago, we were making good films which were good in storytelling, which were good in technical side, particularly because today we are passing through a phase of technical advancement, right from satellite communication to internet. Everything has transformed. But even when this kind of technology was not there, but still good filmmakers used to be there who were trying to be in touch with the foreign technocrats, foreign filmmakers, so that the films which were being made in India could be of a parallel to what was happening in other parts of the world, whether we talk about Britain or the Hollywood or even the Germany. So all that was uncovered to us all in the first session, first segment of Bombay Talkies. So today is the second session, and I believe that we will be the one step ahead, and we could be in a position to understand more, to know more about the legacy that has been left with us by Himanshu Rai. So that is all on this. Over to you, Yashasrika.
Thank you so much, sir. I would now like to hand over to the moderator and master of ceremonies, Dr. Vikrant Kishore. Before we start, I would request all our participants to please share their questions in the chat box. I will take it on their behalf. So without further ado, let us start with the session. Over to you, Vikrant, sir.
Many thanks, Yashashrika, and many thanks to Amrishji again here, meeting on this festival for the 6th day virtually. But then nonetheless, very exciting sessions that we have been doing over the last 5 days, and today is the sixth day, and we are starting with Bombay Talkies again. I must tell you all that how pleased I am seeing how this virtual film festival in a way shaped up, and in its sixth day I can definitely say that it has been really rewarding experience of listening to so many really great film personals, students, as well as different experts in the field of film. And again, congratulations to Ambrish and his team at DME, so many of them. So definitely I have to thank them when during the last session, not today, but I wanted to acknowledge every session. We have to acknowledge the kind of work that has been gone through making this festival happen. So yeah, so I'm going to start with this particular session on Bombay Talkies again. This is the second segment we are doing on the Bombay Talkies, and we have Paul Dietz and Peter Dietz, and as Yashashrika very well, went through their profile and the kind of work they have been doing. We already are aware of Peter, and he talked about Himanshu's work. Today, we are going to focus more. Firstly, I would like to get Paul's view on Himanshu's work and on Bombay Talkies a bit more. Then we'll try to talk a bit more about films and things around Bombay Talkies. But I would like to spend a bit of time on audience questions. So I would definitely like to see questions coming from the audience to both Peter and Paul, and to some extent, even I can take some questions, over the last few years, working on Bombay Talkies and, going through some of these films. I also have a kind of a good view, but definitely it is going to be Paul and Peter who's going to talk more about it. So I'm not going to take much time on doing the introduction, but yeah. So Paul, firstly, welcome, and Peter, to you as well. My first question is to Paul. We would like to know more about you, your work, and your particular association with the Bombay Talkies.
Oh, thanks for the introduction. It's great to be able to speak to you from where I am today on Taungurong country. So yeah, it's a incredible journey that we had. So as was said in the introduction, Peter sort of opportunistically made up some T-shirts with some photographs from the Bombay Talkies time, and gave me some of those T-shirts one Christmas. And I said, where are these photographs from? What's this about? And he said, well, that's your grandfather who was featuring in these photographs. And I said, what? Up until then, my knowledge of my grandfather was that he was a German comedian. And so it came as quite a shock to find out that instead it turned out to be Himanshu Rai. And I spoke to my mother about this, and she said, yes, that's true. And I said, well, has anyone in our family ever tried to make any contact with India or anything? And no one had. No one had done anything at all. And so I took it upon myself to finish my PhD. And then, shortly after I finished that, I took off to India for a year, expecting to spend years trying to locate anything about Himanshu Rai, and then landing in Kolkata. And within, I think, 2 days, I was in my second cousin's lounge room. As soon as I spoke to anyone, everyone knew who Himanshu Rai was. And so there started the journey of discovery, where we learned about effectively, that's when we started to learn about the Bombay Talkies in depth, where we started to learn about Devika Rani and her relationship with not only Himanshu Rai, but then her second husband, Svetoslav Rurik, the famous Russian artist. So it has been an incredible journey from 1994. So the actual T-shirt ceremony, for want of a better word, was around 1994. And then, it was not until 95 that I landed in India.
Thanks for that, Paul. So Peter, would you like to add some more insight to this whole finding of your legacy. You talked about it in the last session, but for a few people who have joined in today and who wouldn't have been a part of the first session, so probably giving them a bit of backgrounder will be good as well. You are muted, Peter.
Is that working now?
Yep,
Yes.
working all fine. Thanks.
Okay, so, well, it was great to listen to Paul's story there. I thought it's great to hear it again. It's very fresh in my mind. All of these coincidences, if you like, the way that this all happened back around that time was all new to us both. And, I was a young businessman doing my thing and raising two young kids, and I really didn't know what was how we were going to find out anything about Hemant Rai. Paul's trip really opened it all up, I think. Now that we've been following his legacy since that time, and we've got a much greater understanding of what went on back in the days. We've had a fabulous archive of material that we've been blessed with that depicts that period of Hemant's life, along with my mother's and grandmother's diaries that hold very valuable information about how it all started back in the day for Hemant in the early 1920s. So yeah, it's been a terrific awakening and a great journey to be a part of. And today I received a book from a research student she had been involved coming to Australia from the university overseas, and she did her PhD or did her research through our archive, and that was in 2010. And now I've received the book, and the book has actually been published, and it's called The Bombay Hustle. And I'm about halfway through, and Debrashi Mukherjee has done a very insightful job of what was going on in Indian cinema in the early 1900s and the Bombay Talkies period. It's a real broad view of what life was like back then. I mean, yeah, it was a very, very, very crazy time. I mean, while Hemant was building the Bombay Talkies, we're about to go into World War II. Things were very difficult for a lot of them, I think.
Yeah. That is very fascinating, and I would definitely like to have a look at the book. And you just talked about the World War II thing happening at that point of time, and that reminds me of this song from Kismet, a 1943 film which in a way launched Ashok Kumar. And there was this song called Dur Hato Hai Duniya Walo, Hindustan Hamara Hai. So the target was the imperialistic forces of Japan and Germany, but actually in a way they were also passing a remark to the British imperialists at that point of time to move out of India. And it was also at the same time of Quit India movement that Gandhi started at that point of time. So a whole lot of creative people responded to that call, and they, in a surrogate manner, they used all those kind of ways to showcase in film. And in 1943 film Kismet, which became a big blockbuster because of its lost and found kind of plot line and a whole lot of new things which was done in its way. So would you like to talk about Kismet, or shall we take it later? Just because the World War II thing came into my mind, I thought I'll put that here.
I'll let you go, Paul.
I've only seen Kismet once, and so I really don't know that I can comment very much on that, Vikram.
Okay, let's move chronologically. So, as Bombay Talkies has done, initially did lots of work, and one of the things was it brought lots of new technology. And Peter did a very fine audiovisual presentation on the kind of history that Bombay Talkies had. So can we discuss a bit more about your discovery of Bombay Talkies, and what did you unearth or what you found, and which was not there earlier in public domain, and you ended up getting a whole lot of uh, kind of archival materials from the museum in New York, and you found lots of these kind of information. So would you like to share some of your findings? So Paul, you can start, or Peter, whoever.
Sure. So, I mean, the history of those of that archive is fascinating. So, so Devika Rani, after she essentially left the cinema world and married Svetoslav Rurik, the Russian I mentioned earlier, they lived in between a place in Himachal Pradesh known as Kulu, near Manali, a place called Nagar, and they moved between there and the Tataguni estate outside of Bangalore. And basically, she managed to keep a whole series of records connected to the Bombay Talkies, which was, so it's an incredibly complicated story. So the Russian artist is incredibly famous in Russia. So his father, Nicholas Rurik, is world renowned as a humanitarian and kind of advocate for peace and art. And so anyway, the Tataguni estate held some incredible treasures and an amazing archive of Indian art, and I guess sort of Eurasian art more broadly. That in the end, during the Gorbachev era, when Russia started to, when the USSR fell apart and Russia began to recognise its past, they orchestrated to move a lot of the material that had been held at the Tataguni estate back to Moscow, to a museum there. And clearly at the same time, Devika had kept records and archives of the Bombay Talkies, and it seems as though what had happened with it is that she thought that the best way to preserve them and stop them getting into or getting lost or into the wrong hands was to send them across to her good friends at the Rurik Museum in New York. And basically they sat in this museum in New York with, presumably I imagine in a basement kind of thing. They weren't on show or anything like that because it wasn't specifically connected to the Ruriks. And then it wasn't until Peter basically went and visited the museum there, and there's a story around that as well, that the director of the museum there basically said that, we have all of these boxes from the Bombay Talkies era that Devika Rani had sent across to us. And he said, basically, we don't know what to do with them. They clearly belong to you. And then sent them across. And so that was the archive that was curated to the exhibition at the Australian Centre of Moving Image. And, it's this incredibly rich catalogue of the path that Himanshu Rai took. So, through through German cinema, through training in various places connected to the avant-garde of the 1920s in Germany, then through into the Bombay Talkies and the establishment of them in the late 20s, early 30s. It's an incredible coincidence, an incredible find. And we're really keen to make sure that this legacy gets looked after appropriately, and we're looking to find somewhere to house them, all of this material, and sort of working through those processes. Pete, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think you've explained it pretty right. Unfortunately, our good friend Daniel Enton has passed away. very good friend of Devika's. Also, I think Michael Breen was also involved as a good friend of Devika's back in the day. You know, there's been different contacts that have sort of have coincidentally come to into our lives, and we're the richer for it. Just to be to get this understanding of what it was all about. I mean, the big thing is for me that you know, we discovered we did have very illustrious grandparents, and having Himanshu Rai in your back pocket was a pretty big find as well. So we've been very carefully going about managing that archive, and I look forward to the days when, you know, perhaps throughout maybe doing some more exhibitions, we can move it through London and through to Germany, and finally on to through America, and then finally on to India, so that it could be cared for in the right way, because it is an extraordinary archive. I mean, some of the things that I stumbled across today, we simply haven't had time to go through the whole thing. It's too immense. You need a football field and, you know, a dedicated squad of people to look after it. But I mean, just in a few of the notes that I looked on Karma today, they've, you know, there was 800 press at the opening of Karma in Birmingham. It was much bigger at the Marble Arch. So it was extraordinary for those times. You know, they were groundbreaking films, whatever he was doing, even though he was struggling all the way. It was extraordinary, the achievements that he made.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things we have to really admire about Devika was that she was very foresighted about, and she also, in a way, she knew the power of archiving things. And this has been a major problem in India, where lots of cinematic history has not been archived well. Today, people are struggling to find historical proofs of so many films. And the film archive at Pune, it also about 20, 30 years back probably, it also got burned down. And it lost a whole lot of valuable archival footage and things which were of India's cinematic history. So I think what Devika did was sending these particular archival material to the museum in New York. It in a way came back. Probably it was meant for you guys to, you know, find it and to bring it to India at this point of time. We are talking about, you know, a history of almost 100 years of cinema. You know, when Bombay Talkies started in 1930s, but before that also Himanshu's work since 1924 and whatever they have been doing. So it's almost 100 years of work that we are talking about today, and so rich and powerful. And the work that you are doing is incredible, and that is an important thing. And today, with the digitization and the digital archives, you know, I think even if you are not able to take it to India in physical form, I think, and probably that's my question to you, are you thinking of creating a digital archive? I know you have a kind of a website, but a digital web archive of Himanshu's work. Have you been thinking about that?
I must say that a very good friend of mine, Jimmy Carreras, actually helped me painstakingly digitized the whole archive. So that it's there for researchers to understand and to gain knowledge from, and, you know, to really enjoy. I mean, it's a wealth of knowledge. That's all I can say. We've had researchers come out from all over the world to be a part of the story and enjoy what's in the archive. I mean, there is stories of the film that you mentioned earlier, Namala, I believe, and all the Bombay Talkies films are listed. There's also scripts, there's also shooting schedules, there's everything that you could possibly imagine. You know, it's Devika Rani's doodling on a page that I find so extraordinary. Just the emotion, you can feel it. You know, I don't believe Paul or myself have ever really gone through the archive in its entirety. It's simply too large, and it requires obviously kid gloves and a proper way of dealing with it. So the digitizing of it, yes, that's being done, and we look forward to, sharing it with as many people as possible, especially students. I mean, this is a groundbreaking material that's never been seen before. So I encourage all young students to take it on board. Some of the material that's available in Ashut Kanya or Karma, for the press clippings alone might be 10 folders with 100 documents per folder. It's crazy. So there's so much to go through and so much to understand. These were, very heady times back then. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. In fact, I would want to show some of the photographs that I picked up from your archive, and these are specifically of Devika and some others as well. So I'm going to share the screen of these photographs, and probably Peter, you would like to, and Paul as well, you would like to talk a bit about some of these photos if you can. Can you see the photograph? That's the first one that I have.
That's, I believe, in Birmingham with the mayor and Devika Rani. And
Okay.
I believe Sir Richard Temple in the background. Yeah, all the major dignitaries there from, that's for the opening of Karma, I believe.
Opening of Karma. Okay. And that was in 1928 then.
No, that was, it was in 1933, Karma. It was prior to it was the film prior to the Bombay Talkies. I always get that wrong, but I think that's 1933, and really that's the first time that Himanshu and Devika appeared on screen together, and the last time they appeared on screen together.
Yeah.
And that was the first talkie that
Correct.
that Himanshu did, and the only talkie that he did. And I think it was at that point he realised that he might be a better producer than actor.
All right. And there was this interesting another photograph, and this is here both Himanshu and Devika with I think Rabindranath Tagore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's in
Yeah, so
Berlin
that's in
in
Germany.
1933. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, Devika was related to Rabindranath Tagore. Can you talk a bit more about that, if you can let people know about that connection? That is hardly talked about generally.
She was his grandniece, and she was, and it's kind of, she came from a very well-to-do family, of course, as a consequence, and so it's not quite clear to us whether how she was received as an actor in the 20s. And when she originally went to England for training, I mean the original thing that she was training in was costume design and dressmaking and things, not acting. So it would have been interesting to see how she would have been seen as an actor in the films that she starred in the 30s and on.
And back in that day, to be an actress, I won't say it was taboo, but it was almost outrageous at the time. They weren't highly regarded in theatres and things like that back in the day.
Yeah, I've got.
That's Himanshu and Devika in somewhere in Germany. Not exactly sure where.
Yeah, sorry, I have these very low quality.
And the interesting thing, Paul, the interesting thing about that photograph is, not while being an actress and an actor in London at the time, they were wearing Western clothes, and that was even considered taboo for Indians of that time, so lots of interesting things, connections.
Yeah. It's a very small photograph. I don't have a bigger quality, but that was Devika and your mom, I suppose. Devika and Lima, it's written.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many interesting photographs here, but yeah, so why I wanted to use this was to talk a bit more about Devika Rani's work, and I think that's a very good kind of discussion around how she, created this archive and worked in that. And she, and for the audience who have joined us here, Devika Rani is considered as the first Indian female superstar. She had her own aura, she had her own kind of body of work, but she was also the co-founder of Bombay Talkies. And later on, after Himanshu, she managed to run the show on her own. And later on, and after that, she decided to leave it, and then she left it with Shashidhar Mukherjee and Ashok Kumar, and then moved on. But then the kind of work she did, and when we talk about participation of women or women taking charge in filmmaking, uh, I still feel Devika Rani's contribution to Indian cinema has been always under discussed. It has always been discussed as her work as a superstar, someone who really dominated the screen. But behind the screen, that is something, or behind the camera, the way she was managing the affairs at Bombay Talkies is something very rarely talked about. So would you both be able to throw some light on the work she was doing and the kind of communications that you have seen in the archive that you are working on?
I'll throw to you, Pete. I'm not really that familiar.
Well, I think that, back in those early days of the Bombay Talkies, Devika, Himanshu was number one. Devika was the actress, and he was grooming her all the way through. And, for her to take on the responsibility after Himanshu passing away would have been very difficult, to be a woman and running that company. And I think it became very difficult for her later on. She really, I think she struggled with it. Her contribution, I guess, is extraordinary for a young woman to be doing that and creating that business, sustaining that business as long as she could. I think there was a lot of infighting after Himanshu passed away, and it all became very messy. The films were different too. I think Himanshu was groundbreaking in the way that he was making films in the early silent era. And when the talkies came along, and the Bombay Talkies, by the time he got it up and running, things had moved on quite dramatically. And the introduction of sound, as Paul mentioned, maybe that wasn't his greatest part to be the actor anymore.
But his production initially then was revolutionary, because what he was doing was making Indian cinema for Indian people. Most of the work that had been done, or that he'd been involved in anyway previously, was really kind of British-German productions for a British-German audience, much more so than an Indian audience. And so the Bombay Talkies was fundamentally about Indian films for Indian people, with the focus on using simple Hindustani was the language for the films. So it wasn't to be in English anymore, and that was his big, really big change. And he was trying to make them on popular social issues in a way that would then lead to film being an accepted medium within India. The challenge after he died, of course, was that there, as Pete said, the difficulties for Devika being a woman in a male-dominated, at least at the production level industry, that made it difficult for her to manage the studio. The films, there weren't anywhere near the same number of hits as there was in the early days, and essentially the studio started to run into financial difficulties. And then I think I think there was a consortium led by Ashok Kumar and a couple of the other stars from the earlier days who eventually, I think it changed hands a couple of times before they bought it, but then they bought the final iteration, and then we know that the buildings fell into disrepair eventually, and now I think it's just last I saw, it was really just a whole lot of pretty average shops were running out of the old buildings and so forth, and that was it.
Yeah, I think post Himanshu Rai, Devika tried to run the studio, but then there was a bit of kind of disagreement between Ashok Kumar and Shashdhar Mukherjee, who actually broke away from her, and then she later on sold her particular shares or whatever to them, and then it's Ashok Kumar and Shashdhar Mukherjee who runs the show post the exit of Devika Rani. But yeah, so it's
one thing Ashok Kumar did do was so I went and visited him in 1995 when I was there, and went to his house in, I can't remember exactly where it was, in Mumbai, and he explained to me that he heard that the Bombay Talkies building was being sold, and so he rushed off to grab the bust of Himanshu Rai that was sitting out the front of the Bombay Talkies building, and he grabbed that and took it home to his house. And so when I arrived in his lounge room, he had a bust of Himanshu Rai sitting there, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's very interesting to know. And yeah, I had something in my mind to ask, but it just yeah. And then, like, we were talking about Devika Rani, and another thing which I really find interesting about Bombay Talkies was that it was how they kept some of the women filmmakers at the forefront. And when the sound started, or the films with sound started, or the talkies started, one of the first music directors that they gave chance to was the legendary Saraswati Devi. And Saraswati Devi is considered one of the India's first female music director, along with Jaddan Bai. Jaddan Bai and Saraswati Devi almost started at the same time. Jaddan Bai was the mother of Nargis, the really big superstar of 1940s and 50s. And so Jaddan Bai and Saraswati Devi, these were the two big female music directors. And I think Saraswati Devi almost gave background music and all the songs as well for more than 15 films of Bombay Talkies. Do you have any idea, or have you heard anything in the archives about Saraswati Devi as such, or not?
Only through, that she was with the film Nirmala. Would that be Ashut Kanya as well?
Yep.
And so, obviously the sound had come in, the first thing I'll say, and it's my opinion that with the first film, Karma, while the other films were silent, there would have been live music, as we know, that would have been performed at those live screenings back in the early 20s. But as you move into the 1933 with Karma, it was a different director. It wasn't Franz Osten, and it had a little bit more of a Hollywood feel to it. And I noticed in Nirmala, that's the same sort of thing. You get a more Western approach. And I'm sure that that's what the Bombay Talkies was trying to do, is emulate what was happening in Hollywood, which they didn't need to do, by the way, at all, because they had, as you said, Saraswati Devi performing beautiful music. And but in some cases, some of the films later on, in my opinion, they became too Hollywood and should have stayed more Bollywood.
That's interesting. But one thing which I realized while talking to Paul earlier, and he was talking about how the silent films of Himanshu Rai before the advent of Bombay Talkies, primarily they were looking at the European audience for their films. And that's why now I can connect that whole aspect of how, forward looking those films were, with all the, kissing scenes and, high technical, inputs, and kind of a very, very Western sensibility, because they were trying to cater to that Western audience initially. And only after the formation of Bombay Talkies that they moved towards the Indian audience. Another thing which I noticed that while talking about Saraswati Devi, it was that she, from 1935 to 1941, she gave music to almost 20 of the Bombay Talkies films. Okay, so she was the main music director of Bombay Talkies. So it's very fascinating, and it's also fascinating. And I want to share with the audience here about the history of Saraswati Devi in a way. So Saraswati Devi, she was not a Hindu, but she was known as Khurshid Manchester Minocha Homji. But the moment she went into film industry, her community boycotted her. The Parsi community boycotted her because they felt anyone, especially women, going into cinema, it's below their dignity. It is a very trashy way to, make a earning or living. And then she faced the wrath of her community. And to save herself from that wrath, she changed her name into Saraswati Devi, and she started, appearing in films with that particular name. So it was very interesting to see, and how she managed to keep on fighting and to give music. So, and then she gave music into all these popular films like Achut Kanya, Jeevan Naya, Nirmala, Vachan, Durga, Bhakt Raidas, Amrapali. So, and she was one of the first person to use Western orchestra along with Timir Baran. So, and she brings in the Western music influence in Indian cinema. So that's another contribution of hers. So very fascinating kind of a historical context, and the coming of using Western instruments, which becomes very, very heavy post 50s onwards. Yeah, I would rather say. You had something to say, Peter.
Well, I just think that that's an amazing achievement that she was. Again, that's groundbreaking. Sound had just come in. This was just such a big deal. And while I'm still a fervent supporter of Himanshu's early films, I can understand how they had to move with those times and change and go forward, as you say. And that's what the company had to do to be progressive at the time. I mean, yes, as we all know, it was the largest studio outside of India, inside India. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm thinking now is that because it's almost 4 o'clock here, and we have some time for audience interaction. If we have some questions, then we'll take some questions from the audience. And if we don't have any questions, then I'll leave the discussion. So Yashashrika, do we have any questions?
Yes, sir. So we have one question from a student, Priyanka Nathani. She's asking about how important was the role of Devika Rani, his co-actor and wife, in the establishment of Bombay Talkies and its success.
Yeah, Paul.
I just think, well, from my point of view, I just think that Himanshu really, Devika was his protege in a way, and then when she became the star, she also had this responsibility and took on the Bombay Talkies, and as we both have mentioned before, it's a remarkable achievement what she contributed along the way. I mean, she really did hold the whole thing together. And Himanshu, I don't think he would have been the easiest person to get along with. Yet Devika was the darling of the period, whether it be fans in India or fans around the world. She was, she was number one, and her contribution will never be unrecognised. She was just fabulous. And, you have to have a look at some of these images that we do have in the archive. not just her beauty, but she was always pushing the Bombay Talkies, and there's documents to prove how involved she was in the day-to-day running of the business. And yeah, she was an integral part of the Bombay Talkies. There's no doubt about that.
Well, and fundamentally, it was her star power and the luck of being able to bring Ashok Kumar into Achut Kanya that really
Absolutely.
made a huge impact. I mean, it was that film that really drove the Bombay Talkies. Certainly the early success, but then it certainly was the reputation that drove the next 10 years. And I'm sure you would have spoken about the complete accident that it was that they brought Ashok Kumar onto the set from working as a film technician. They brought him in because I can't remember the name of the star who left before the film commenced, and as a consequence, Ashok was brought in, and the chemistry that he and Devika had in that film was transformative.
Yep. Yashashvika, do we have any other questions?
Yes, another question, sir. We have what was the impact of Bombay Talkies films on commercial Hindi films?
Sorry, could you say that again, please?
Yes. Sir, it's what was the impact of Bombay Talkies films on commercial Hindi films, on Bollywood?
Well, it fundamentally laid the foundations for the entire Bollywood enterprise, really. I mean, it was, essentially, as I said before, that notion of using simple Hindustani to communicate to the audience and to, it obviously involved dancing and singing and so forth. I guess the sort of reflection on significant social issues such as caste and so forth in those early films is something that Bollywood turned away from for a while. And I guess I personally think the artistic merit of those earlier films is much higher than a lot which came after. But certainly it had fundamentally laid the groundwork for what's there today.
Peter,
Yeah.
sir, would you like to add?
Peter, would you like to add something?
Look, I think Paul said it pretty well there. You know, that's as far as the longevity or the finance, how did it impact financially? You only have to have a look at what the business is today. I mean, that's where it all comes to fruition when we look at how large the industry is today, and the fact that we talk about the Bombay Talkies today with a little bit of reference because it was the groundbreaking studio that it was. And you only have to look around at the films today. A lot of the plot lines are still the same. A lot of things that have come out of Bombay Talkies have really proven longevity. They really stand the test of time. And they were originals. They were really setting the pace back in the day. That what Paul was mentioning about the caste system, that again goes back to the importance of Devika Rani in this role as a powerful woman. And today we're still struggling to find those powerful women, and we want more of them. And that's really the legacy I think that she brought. Whether it's the financial, it's even more than that. She led the way for a lot of young filmmakers possibly to follow in her footsteps and to create films that delved into unpopular topics. And yes, she was a groundbreaker. Rarefied air, these people. They were truly astounding.
Yeah. I would also like to contextualize a few of the things. Like for this session, we had requested audience to watch three films. First was Kismet, second was, no, first was Achut Kanya, second was Kismet, and third was Mahal. Of course, all the three films are from three different kind of time period of Bombay talkies, and probably if Achut Kanya was around 1936, Kismet was a 1943 film, and Mahal was around 1949. So three different eras, three different kind of ownership of Bombay talkies, but three landmark films as well. Achut Kanya, as both Peter and Paul talked about, that it brought in the social issue, and the social issue at that point of time was about how the Indian society was looking towards each other. So it was about the caste system and caste structure and fight against those. And social issues at that point of time, they were picked up, but not very many films looked at the caste discrimination. Until date, we have a problem with that kind of systematic repression because of a religion and religious bigotry or whatever you call it. So that was, I think, still is a landmark film. Whenever we talk about caste discrimination, we always go back to Achut Kanya in some way or the other because it was one of the first films to do that. But when we come to Kismet, it brings Bollywood alive. While I say why do I say Bollywood alive? Because Kismet was the first film which actually utilized the plot of Lost and Found. Okay, someone so, and Lost and Found plot line till date is being used in masala films. Okay, so in a way, the advent of masala films with song and dance, with a bit of melodrama, with bit of action, with bit of drama, all those things which gave that particular typical Hindi film or the commercial Hindi film was brought to life was, I think, the first one was Kismet, and it became a big rage. And the third film, which was directed by Kamal Amrohi, Mahal. Mahal was this paranormal kind of a bit of horror kind of a film, which was about reincarnation. And Mahal, starring Ashok Kumar, and it also launched the biggest female superstar of the 1940s and till 1950s, Madhubala. Okay, Madhubala gained a huge stature after Mahal, and it was about. It became a cult film that after that Madhumati, which featured Dilip Kumar and Vajanti Mala, it was actually influenced by Mahal. Post Madhumati also it inspired Kurz, featuring Rishi Kapoor, and of course you all know how Kurz is such a kind of a cult film. And of course, Kurz and Madhumati, it gives way to, or in a way inspires the I always like using Om Shanti Om as a film to understand Bollywood. Okay, so if you want to understand Bollywood masala film, if you also want to understand how Bollywood uses so many things, actually Om Shanti Om is inspired, and it is a kind of a tribute to whatever Hindi film is all about. So it uses the scenes from Madhumati and Kurz, and in a way pays tribute to Mahal as well. And that's what, and in a way, if you look at the linkage between all the three films, Achut Kanya, Kismet, and Mahal, and then you understand the flow of Indian, or rather Hindi cinema. I think it is a very powerful way to talk about it, and that's why I chose the three films for the audience to watch beforehand, and they will get a sense that Bombay Talkies, when we talk about it, and when we talk and I especially use the term in a way of reverence, and I understand the kind of history that Bombay Talkies really, really historically has contributed to Indian cinema. So anyway, over to you, Yashashrika.
Yes, sir. So, sir, since we were talking about Achut Khanna, so there's this question which says, have the films that have followed Achut Khanna been able to subvert caste politics like it did?
Ah, probably this is not a question for Peter or Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah, uh, it didn't. It didn't. It got. I will talk because caste politics is my research area, and I've been doing lots of work in that area, so somehow I definitely can speak on that. I don't feel Achut Kanya, though, making a very big contribution and getting started in terms of films to look socially, and social cause was not about just domestic violence or the role of women, which in the initial cinema, if you look at in India, the initial Indian cinema, they were really looking at those kind of issues. And of course, post 40s or coming of Raj Kapoor and the socialism in the 1940s films. And if you look at 1950s, with the call, with the independence of Indian cinema and Nehru's call for industrial revolution and the farm revolution, so all the initial films of 1950s and 1960s was revolving around, about the stories of modernizing India and about the industrial progress and all those things. While by 1960s we become more romantic in our outlook and and all those kind of stories. And by late 1960s, it's Rajesh Khanna era, the biggest superstar of that point of time. And 1970s, you see, where India suddenly, the corruption with the problems and India, that particular issue. And that's where the advent of Angry Young Man starts. So you see that story, moves on, and we have different kind of era. But somehow, issues of caste was never in the prominence. You know, even when uh, I always find Angry Young Man, very, very strong representation of Amitabh Bachchan. But he was always fighting against the system for the wrongs done to his family or to the wrongs done to the working class or things like that. But it was never about that caste, okay? Or when Amitabh Bachchan, even if the moment he matures and he becomes the superstars and starts collaborating with Manmohan Desai, it is all about that great Indian brotherhood. Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Isai, hum sab hai bhai, that brotherhood. So Manmohan Desai's films were all about pan-Indian film, which was always celebrating the brotherhood between religion, between everything. But it was never looking inwards about the kind of discrimination it had within itself. And nobody was wanting to challenge that or wanting to take on to that, because it was always problematic, because they felt that it is not commercially viable. Till date, that is the problem whenever you take up social issues or kind of films on basis of certain thing that you want to do. Where while in Hollywood or in European cinema, the case is different. When they pick up these kind of very socially conscious or stories which really focuses on issues, be it the African American issues in Hollywood films or in European cinema, there are different kind of initially, or if you look at the Italian cinema or you look at the Mexican cinema, when they were looking at the slum dwellers or the class discriminations or the church's role, so many films in India, except for the parallel cinema. Okay, there's a big difference between commercial cinema and the parallel cinema of India, which started in 1970s, which really did well in bringing these issues. But commercial cinema, till date, unfortunately, it hasn't done justice to these kind of issues.
So we have one more question, which is related to Mehel. Um, how has Mehel changed the horror genre? Is what a student is asking. Supernatural horror genre.
It hasn't changed. It is still the same. Supernatural horror genre of India remains more or less repetitive. Okay, because our Indian, if you look at any of the Japanese or Korean or any of these kind of horror cinema, which are on supernatural horror things, which Indians are being inspired and remaking many of the films, and that's how the landscape of horror cinema is changing. But more or less, our horror features about rebirth, reincarnation, and things like that, and it is always about retribution. Okay, so most of these kind of, and I really love those kind of films. I always enjoy, even I know it is repetitive, it is something, as I think any Indian cinema lover or a Bollywood fan, we really enjoy the repetitiveness of that. We enjoy the lost and found plots, we enjoy the masala films, and we know what is going to happen next. We still love it. Mehel definitely started that reincarnation stories, but it still is there. And whatever you see, mostly, even the last film, which I think Ram Gopal Verma brought in lots of horror films, which changed the direction of horror cinema in India and made people think about horror in a different way. And of course, now the latest ones, which I think which are very inspired by Korean, Japanese, and all these horror cinema, giants. I think it's making a difference. But what Mehel started, I think till date there are lots of people who are takers for that, and they love that kind of reincarnation stories.
Definitely, sir. So there's this question for Paul, sir, and Peter, sir. This is, what challenges do you encounter while preserving and exhibiting objects that are so old?
I'll take it on, but the challenges are that there is never enough funding. There's never enough time to, because we all have our busy lives that we lead. And since discovering this archive, we are charged with a responsibility to look after it, to care for it in the best possible way. I don't think it's even been opened more than, half a dozen times in the last 10 years. So we are caring for it, and we do have, as I said, we have a working plan that these documents should be seen by lots of young, interested cinema lovers all over the world. It's a unique opportunity for them to understand where it all really began. And we'll be planning on taking this exhibition, the exhibition that we ran in Melbourne. As I've mentioned before, it's more of a vignette. It was only 75 pieces of a 3,000 piece collection. So if we are lucky enough to find sponsorship and find people that are like-minded to be able to assist with and collaborate and make something special and beautiful, to travel to London, so be it. There is definitely a London connection. There's also the unique German connection. We'd love to see it in America, and as we've all mentioned, we'd like to have it be in India for all people to maybe put on permanent display. It's a large archive, and it's a large undertaking. At this stage, I don't think anybody's ready for it, and I'm hoping that changes over the next short period. We don't want it to go unseen for too long. We'd like it to be enjoyed by as many people as possible, and we want them to enjoy and understand the great legacy that Amancio and Devika have provided all Indian cinema goers. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I agree, Peter. And I think this is the right time to propose something that we should take a lead as CIFFI, and I'll definitely, ask Amrish Saxena to take a lead in this and try and, for our next edition in 2021, we should, at least in a small way, we should organize a kind of an exhibition when things are normal, probably by that time. In Delhi, we can do an exhibition on Bombay Talkies. Why not take it another step forward? And if Amrish is here, I would like him to come on online and share his thoughts on it.
So there seems to be some network connectivity issue.
Yeah, no problem. We'll catch hold of him later at the end of the session.
Yes, sir. So this was the last question, sir. Over to you, Vikrant, sir.
Yeah, so you want to say something, Peter, about the book, or what?
I'm just holding it up so that anybody who's interested in Indian cinema, there's material that's contained in this book called The Bombay Hustle that is from our archive, and it's authored by Debrashi Mukherjee, and it's a wonderful read, and I encourage everyone to go out and get a copy and enjoy it.
Definitely. So this was an insightful and enriching session. Discussing about Bombay Talkies has surely satiated the film buff in me. I'm sure our audience have gained several new insights today. Now I would request Dr. Susmita Bala, Head DME Media School and Festival Associate Director to please give some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Yashasvika. Very good morning to all present here. Thanks, Peter Dees, Mr. Paul, Dr. Vikram Kishore, and Dr. Saxena for this wonderful curated session. Mr. Paul and Ms. Peter explained vividly about Bombay Talkies and the different aspects. This is very good to know that you are working on the heritage of Himanshu Rai. We are obliged to you for that. Yes, you are right, Vikrant sir. We can organize exhibition in 2021. So we can plan for that. Yes. So thank you all for this nice curated session. Thank you.
Exhibition definitely
Namaste,
sounds very
namaste.
exciting.
Yeah.
Vikrant sir,
Yeah.
any final comments?
No, I think it was a great session. And firstly, thanks to Peter and Paul for sharing their insight about the work of Himanshu Rai and Bombay Talkies and sparing time. It's the holiday season here in Australia, Christmas holidays, and getting them here for this session and it's sparing time for this. I'm really thankful to them. But this has to be an ongoing, continuous discussion about the kind of heritage that we are talking about. And as I mentioned earlier, that whole lot of our filmic archive and filmic heritage has been lost in India. And if something like this has been undertaken by Peter and Paul, it needs to be supported by all of us. And we need to find ways as to how we can continuously, even once a year, continuously, we come together to celebrate what Bombay Talkies, contributed to Indian cinema and find ways to, do it both in Australia and as well as India. And I'm really grateful and thankful to DME for organizing this amazing film festival, which we are also a partner. Deakin University is a partner. And thanks to all. Again, a big thanks to Amrish Saxena, Dr. Sushmita Bala, Yashasvika for hosting this, and thank you for all the help, and all other staff members of DME for really putting in so much of hard work in organizing this amazing online virtual first of its kind. And for an educational institute, it's a very big endeavor. So congratulations to all, and thanks again, Peter and Paul. And if you would like to share anything before you go, definitely feel free to say.
Thank you.
Paul.
Well, thanks so much for inviting us, and it's wonderful to get a chance to talk to people who are interested in this legacy, which is so stunning. And I look forward to hopefully being able to contribute further in the future.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to thank moving forces behind this celebration of cinema. I want to thank our jury members for patiently and fairly watching all movies and for giving their precious time and feedback. CIFFI would have been incomplete without the efforts of Dr. Amrish Saxena and Dr. Vikrant Kishore, Festival Director, for guiding us constantly and helping us with the planning. I would like to thank CIFFI core team for meticulous planning, Ms. Manmeet Kaur, Festival Joint Director, Ms. Kritika Sati and Mr. Sachin Naya, Festival Deputy Director. I would like to extend my thanks to Mr. Ritik Ghosh, Festival Joint Director, and Mr. Sumantra Sarthi Das, Festival Co-Director, for the seamless streaming of films and sessions on the platform. I must thank our students, Priyanka, Ishita, Shriya, Ayush, Siddharth, Ashray, Aditi, Shubham, Mayank, Sagorika, Simran, Gunjan, who are working 24 hours to ensure smooth functioning of the festival. We would also like to thank Mr. Tigmanshu Dhulia, the famous editor, producer, and director, our festival ambassador for CIFFI 2020. We have live streaming going on simultaneously on 2 platforms, with first screen showcasing all the movies selected in the festival, and the second screening hosting panel discussion, masterclass, and curated sessions like these. I would like to thank the core team of CIFFI for organizing the fest while facing all the obstacles for the pandemic. I would also like to extend my thanks to Festival Associate Director Dr. Susmita Bala, Head DME Media School, and all my dear colleagues who have helped us organize this event in various capacity. The next curated session we have is on the topic of Before Bollywood, This session is courtesy Indian Documentary Producer Association and will be moderated by Professor Suresh Sharma with faculty coordinator Ms. Shwanu Jain, wherein 3 documentaries will be screened: Dastane-Rafi, The King of Romance, Shami Kapoor, and Mahendra Kapoor. Also enjoy our films on our website, CIFFI2020.ac.in. The movies streaming on the platform today include Alone, Birdsong, A Day in Times of Lockdown, Life in the Lockdown, Baruha, Living in with Corona, Humanity Must Live On Forever, Isolation Was My Friend, How, Haridwar, The Heart of Ganga, Road Safety, Satkalan, Artham, Anartham, Walking with the Planets, Franklin, Home of Soul, Meow or Never, The Catapult, The Forgotten Tigers, The Python Code, and Koti Banal. Stay tuned to get nuanced perspective about cinema. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Paul, and thanks, Sushmita ji.
Namaste. Thanks very much. All the best to you. See you, Paul.
Bye,
Thanks for your
everyone.
help.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.